start with your names and your lodge and your positions.
Roger MacGregor, Elko Lodge number 15, FNAM, and I'm currently the treasurer. Past master, twice removed.
I'm Jim Byars, past master. I've been master of this lodge twice, and I've also been master of Eureka Lodge number 16, which was founded a year after this one a couple of times, about 90 miles south of here. So it's been a real interesting journey, and currently I'm trustee of this lodge.
You know, you told me a little bit about the history of Elko Lodge number 15 since I've had the chance to be here, and you took me on the tour of the Root Mountains. But just how old is Elko Lodge, and how long has it been part of this community?
Well, we just celebrated in September. We celebrated our 151st anniversary. Due to the fact that we couldn't meet last year due to COVID, we made it our 150th celebration as well. So this lodge was actually founded in September of 1871 by the Grand Lodge of Nevada, and a communication of that body. And so we've been serving this community even before it was a community. This community was founded somewhere around 1868-69 when the railroad, the Central Pacific Railroad, came through, and then they met up with the Union Pacific over in Utah, the Transcontinental Railroad, which united east and west of the United States. Actually, one of the vice presidents of the Central Pacific Railroad donated land for our Masonic cemetery on the side of the other side of town as well. And so we always had people coming through on the train, stopping over, visiting the lodge. It's been pretty interesting. We go through the old books, we'll find names of people that came through as well. And then over the years, we've just been part of the community, actually. It's just, this building dates from 1955. Previously, when we started out, we were in a building on the other side of town, and then we moved to another building down by the hotel where you and I went to breakfast this morning, and now we're over here, and this building was set up in 1955, and we've got the cornerstone out there.
You mentioned, or you used the phrase that this lodge has been serving the community since even before as a community, and I know there's a lot of different ways that you serve the community. One way that you mentioned, and we have the brother here to discuss it, right, is the scholarships that you guys have. Tell me about those.
Sure. We've got currently 3 scholarships total. 3 that are administered all out of this lodge. One we consolidated with 8029, and that one is kind of playing out now as the money is being used. But we've got 2 others, and we give out about 15,000 committed dollars to several students each year. One of those scholarships, one of our members, generously donated, set up a fund of $150,000 about 10 years ago, and we take the interest off that, and we administer that account. So from that, we give out another $8,500 per year to scholars that meet their criteria. And we've got another one, Elko Lodge number 15 account, a scholarship account, and that usually hands out about anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 a year. And that one, we go ahead and we donate to it throughout the year. And unlike a lot of our other accounts, our goal on that account is zeroed out at the end of each year, so we can go ahead and give out as much money as we can. And usually we're giving out $500 scholarships to one-time scholarships there. The Merlin Ronk Scholarship, which is the one Merlin had set up with the fused with 150,000, that pays out up to $4,000 over a 4-year period. So we track the students as they go through the local college here.
How important is it for Elko Lodge to, and not just in terms of scholarships, but in other ways, which I'm sure you guys will discuss, how important is it for the lodge to be of service to the community and to be part of the community?
Well, the things that we do in the community besides the scholarship are usual Masonic things like setting cornerstones, and our Shrine Club, of course, participates in all the parade for our little funny cars. But actually, one of the big things is we've got cornerstones on several buildings throughout this town, and we'll gather together and go through that ancient ritual of setting a cornerstone, which really impresses the public. We have open houses here at times as well. We've done, Roger and I, over the years have both been bagpipers, and we serve the community in that way. And maybe you talk about that a little bit more since you kind of lead bagpiper there.
Well, sure, and that's one of the things I brought from, being an implant here in the mining industry from Canada was my love and interest, passion for bagpipes. So I've been teaching that here for going on 30 years. Actually, Jim is one of my students, and he plays the bagpipes, and I've taught dozens here. So what we do is we service various functions, Masonic functions, and in the public. And whether it's a Masonic funeral, or just getting out playing a parade, or various other funerals and happy events too, parties and so on. So one of the big things that I was excited when I first moved here is there was a couple that would put on a Robbie Burns dinner every year, and just out of their home. Well, since that time, it's grown, and we've taken it on, and we actually host it here at the lodge because we've got the facilities, thankfully, to do so. And we've had as much as many as 80 people at this. And it's a fundraiser. For those that don't know, Robbie Burns, the Scottish poet, was also a Mason. And so we put, various pictures, paintings, posters of him around the area and decorate the lodge and basically educate those that may not otherwise know. And it's a tremendous fundraiser for the scholarship and also for our Blue Lodge, which always is looking for money.
What type of, you talked about the cornerstones. We've done, recently in 2017, we did a cornerstone ceremony at the new Windsor City Hall. What are some of the buildings that you've done cornerstone ceremonies on here in Elko?
Well, we had the Grand Lodge over here for the new airport in the early 2000s. We were over there, and they came over and we did that. We've also done cornerstone up at Great Basin College. We've done, in years past, we did a cornerstone down at the post office. And
Chamber of Commerce as well. There's several around town that over the years we've been doing and involved with. And like I say, it's a very impressive ceremony. It's a good way to get the community aware of what we're doing. And on a sadder note, Masonic funerals, you get a lot of people out. And that Masonic funeral ritual is one of the most beautiful things that I've had people just tell us over and over, how much they appreciated that for their loved ones when they passed on who were Masons.
Yeah, I think, I always recommend to newer brothers in the craft, even if you didn't personally know the brother, if you learn of a Masonic funeral, it's always a good idea to try to make it out if you can, right? Because you're showing support for that brother, that brother's family, right? And that you recognize that, you're part of the same organization, even if you may not have known him for whatever reason. It's worth taking the time to attend.
No, absolutely. It can be quite emotional and moving, but it's such an important thing to do for a passing brother, I think.
Going back to the cornerstone ceremonies, it's not real, even though we had a major cornerstone ceremony in Windsor, it's really not something I've talked about a lot on the podcast, which I really should discuss more. Like you said, it's such a great opportunity to kind of connect with the public. How did your lodge go about, setting up or organizing a ceremony? So if you learn of a new building that's being built, do you contact the owners? Do you contact Grand Lodge? Like, what are the steps that you take to prepare for a cornerstone ceremony?
Well, in the past, what we would do is generally with somebody knew somebody, and they would ask something about out in a new building, and someone felt that they needed that ceremony because they had seen it before. So it's a deal where they contact us, and perhaps sometimes we contact them. It's a word of mouth type thing, I guess. But it's very impressive, and anytime there's a new building that goes up, you know, we're interested in helping out with that, and we let it be known so that perhaps if they choose to do so, we can perform that ceremony for them through the Grand Lodge.
And so after, you know, that initial contact has been made, do you contact the Grand Lodge? What are the next steps to actually schedule and start the process?
Well, actually, yeah, you contact the Grand Lodge, let them know what's going on so that they have an opportunity to put something together. They'll either get all of their corps of officers out here, but generally in the past, we're kind of out on the frontier out here on this side of the state. You get most of the officers or some of the officers, and members of this lodge will fill in for those other spots during the ceremonies, like the ceremony there for the airport. There was about 3 or 4 of us that just, you know, filled in for those different things. And the Grand Master, of course, is pivotal and key to this thing. He runs the whole deal, and the different speaking parts that are out there. But
And also Grand Master needs to give dispensation.
and dispensation, of course, you know.
Yeah.
What would you say to, it could be a lodge or just even a brother watching this who are thinking about trying to organize a cornerstone ceremony, or maybe they've never done, maybe their lodge has never been part of a ceremony before, but they're in a town where there's new developments and things being built. You know, what advice do you have for them about maybe looking at doing one of these cornerstone ceremonies or getting started?
Well, we did a cornerstone when I was in the Grand Lodge 10 years ago or something. I was the Grand Marshal for Reed Mosley, who was the Grand Master at that time, 2011. But we did a cornerstone ceremony down in Eureka. The Eureka Lodge is very small down there, but we were in contact with them, and they had just built a new fire station. And so we got actually all of the Grand Lodge down there, and the dependent bodies, the York Rite and everything, and as such, I was in the York Rite, I still am, but I was an officer in the York Rite at that time as well. And so, yeah, we went down there and did that, and Eureka's a lot smaller than Elko, and it was a very impressive ceremony. I think it helped that little lodge down there quite a bit when we did that many years ago.
The challenges, whether it's a smaller lodge like Eureka, Elko, or even bigger lodges, right? I think every Masonic organization is kind of facing a lot of the same challenges. You know, we talked about this off camera. One of the challenges that Elko is facing, but not alone, right, is the transient nature of the community, mining town, people coming in and then leaving for work, leaving for other commitments. Right? What are some of the ways that, you know, because I know you guys have a degree coming up, you know, the rebuilding aspect of Freemasonry, right? Just what has that been like for Elko Lodge? How have you guys sought to rebuild the lodge or continually rebuild the lodge in the face of some of the challenges that every single lodge is facing out there?
It's been tough, like a lot of lodges. We did talk about our mining community is transient. It's international, so you'll spend time with brothers and then they'll move on. We end up helping a lot of other lodges, it seems, but we've also seen a resurgence, and which has been exciting. You know, we've just put 2 new brothers through. We've got 3 brothers that we're putting through now. There was a delay with the pandemic, of course, and that hurt us, as a lot of other lodges did. But I think the key, and Jim and I particularly are really passionate about this, is when a brother knocks, don't take too long to reach back out to the individual and really set up a rapport. And we'll meet once a week with several brothers to go ahead and make sure the education is being done and that their questions are being answered and they're well prepared for what they're about to embark on in their Masonic career. And the more passionate that you can show for the craft, the more passion they will give back.
You talked about being prepared, or the importance of preparation. You know, how important is it for a lodge to take the time to be prepared, not only in terms of the lodge itself and the work and being an officer, but even for somebody interested in joining, for an applicant, to kind of take the time to prepare them for, you know, what Freemasonry is and what they can expect and what they're going to get into. That process, getting to know an applicant, you know, while he's still Mr. Smith before he becomes Brother Smith.
Yeah, no, very good question. You know, it's not just here's the petition and check the box and we'll show up for your first degree. We go through, we'll get several Masons together, such as we are right now, and we'll talk to the brother. And so almost they can do an interview on us as much as them. And that just sets up the initial report before we even get into the formality of the investigation. And at some point you can get a good idea of the passion right there, although it's a leap of faith, as we say, right? But that to me sets up the preparation. So I would say it's all communication is the preparation, really. Communicating who's going to reach out, when is this going to happen, report back to the worshipful master as to the progress, and then once the brother is a brother, Mr. to a brother, then it's key that progress be communicated. And it's interesting how you understand, after talking with a brother, communicating not only the information, but we spend a lot of time going through lectures and information, but it's more getting to know the person and understanding how they learn, and how they memorize. And it's not just the memory, but we have this mantra that we don't want people just to blindly memorize, you know, a Q&A. We want them to fully understand to the best of everybody's ability what it is, what it means. And if you know the essence of the true meaning of what the question and answers are, then you get more commitment from that brother. And if they can understand it, then it perpetuates, and they can see themselves at some point in time later on being a teacher and teaching others.
Well, you know, also along those lines too, you're talking about bringing in the new brothers, but something else that's very important, which we try to do here, is to keep in contact with the older brothers that can no longer come to the lodge, like the fellow over in Carlin. Tell them about that. That was an interesting experience. Roger and I went over to see this brother in Carlin, and I thought it was really neat how it worked out.
Yeah, so unfortunately he kind of fell through the cracks, and his name came up, and we were remiss in not giving him his 50-year pin, and I think we were probably 3 or 4 years late on that, and so we apologized profusely to the brother. But quite a shut-in. He kind of an invalid. He couldn't get out of the house, and certainly couldn't make it to lodge meetings to go ahead and go through a formal ceremony. What was interesting is that we went to his house, and when we finally found it, it was Jim and I, there was a door knocker on his front door, and it was a square and compasses. And I said, you know, Jim and I looked at one another, and we kind of chuckled a little bit and said, you know, Masonry may have forgotten him, but he never forgot Masonry.
Yeah, that was a moving experience. It really was.
Yeah.
And I presented several 50-year pins over the years when I was master as well to fellows that lived out of town. It's always been a really good experience. We just did it recently with a fellow from Salt Lake who was a past master of this lodge and has Lou Gehrig's disease, and we were in there and he was in his wheelchair and everything. But there again, they never forget they're a Mason.
Yep.
If the lodge doesn't keep in touch with them for whatever reason, and sometimes depending on our situation, we're not as good as we should be at that. It just brings that back to life, and it kind of brings a spark to me too when I see the spark in their eye when someone shows up from the lodge to do something for them.
Yeah, it's just been great having you here, because suddenly we want to clean up the lodge and make it spick and span for you.
It's a beautiful lodge, it's a beautiful temple, and it's a beautiful town. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Amtrak, for having this as a stop so I could get on and see Elko. You know, I do have to, this will be the part of the interview where I have to push back on you guys a little bit. I do wonder, like, this has been my challenge as of late with Freemasonry. The distinction that sometimes is being made, where it's like there's the lodge and the brother, right? My philosophy has always been, you know, the lodge is the brother. Like, you can't separate the two. I mean, I do think one thing that I've tried to communicate, and we talk about communicate to newer members, but even older members who maybe have lost touch with the lodge, we lost touch with them, is, you know, that communication has to be a two-way street. Like, becoming secretary of the lodge, for example, when I became secretary of the lodge, you're looking at this role, and you're like, you know, haven't talked to so-and-so and talked to so-and-so, and you're calling people, and oh, this person died, you know, 7 or 8 years ago. And
Yes.
the argument is sometimes I've heard from people, well, the lodge didn't do a sufficient job in keeping in touch with that brother, but there's also got to be some responsibility on the brother to maintain contact with the lodge. Like, I've got I call it in case I get hit by a bus, knock on wood, in case I get hit by a bus plan, especially because I'm secretary, but in my will, it lists, you know, if I become incapacitated, if I pass away, like, this is the word, these, you know, my executor knows these are the people you call, this is what happens to my regalia, this is where I keep my lodge records, these are, you know, this is how you let the lodge know what's happened to me, and this is how, and that's if I get hit by a bus, or if I become incapacitated,
Right.
there's a plan in place to make sure the lodge knows what's happened to me. And if I move, you know, the first thing I do before anything else is I let the lodge know my new address. Right? And when I leave the house, you know, I check to make sure I have my credit card, I check to make sure I have my keys, and I check to make sure I have my dues card, because I always want to have that on me. And I've talked to brothers where it's like they have no idea where their dues card is. They've moved 3 times. They didn't inform the lodge where they've moved. You know, it's always good to keep Masonry in your heart, and I'm not suggesting these brothers aren't doing that, but you got to be. It's important to communicate, like, there's practical things in place too. Like, if you die, does your family know if you want a Masonic funeral? Does your family know who to contact to let them know what happened to you, especially if you're an officer in an important position?
Right.
You know, just real quick,
Yeah.
that reminds me of what kind of brought to mind something that Roger was telling me when he first became a Mason, and keeping in touch with these guys. Tell about what happened to you, your personal experience. I think that was pretty neat when Worshipful Master Robert Brewer came up to you that time.
Well, when I first went through, I did it fast track. And several Masons out there listening to this probably the same way. You know, is check the box. Oh, first degree, second degree, third degree. Okay, now what? Yeah, great. I'm on top of the mountain, and now what's the next thing I'm going to do on my bucket list? Right? It's like, did you not remember or learn anything in that 3 month, or it took me 4 months to go through all the degrees? Yeah, so it's probably more of a fast track. And a couple of months later, I had one of our masters, or worshipful master at the time, knock on my door, just out of the blue. He wasn't there to beat me up about not coming out. Of course, that would be on Masonic to do so. He presented a book on Masonry and said, "Brother, we miss you. It'd be great to have you out at whatever meeting you can make it. And if you got any questions, give me a call." And he signed the book, and I still have it today. And I use it for Masonic teachings. But I wonder if I hadn't, taken his knock at the door, if I'd be here sitting here now having this conversation. But he took the time to reach out and communicate. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, it's the little, it can be the little things, right, that can, the world can turn on the details, or the little act of kindness, or the whatever it might be, that brings the guy back into Lodge.
I think you raised a lot of good questions, and when you went through the secretaries, I'm going to call them the secretaries' woes, because all the secretaries out there listening to this, God bless you. I've not been the secretary. I've been in most positions in the Lodge, and it's a huge undertaking. And I also have felt the pain of trying to get even email addresses and contacts done. And one year decided, hey, we're going to divide and conquer and take all of our officers, and okay, you're going to take letters A through F, and the next brother's going to take this, and we're going to call all the brothers and just see how they're doing and just reach out. Trestle boards are another thing. Jim and I are pretty passionate about getting back to doing trestle boards. They're a pain in the butt, there's no question about it. But what they do is they help reach out to brothers and let them know how we're doing. And if we can keep that, again, that communication going. And a valid thing to do and put on a trestle board, you gave me an idea right there, was this is how you do keep in touch, and here's some opportunities to donate if you choose to, and various committees and other, and just a whole rift of things that can be done through a trestle board.
Yeah, and I was really, really proud of, during COVID, when we were locked down, I maintained a monthly trestle board with messages, and even though we weren't meeting, I still had announcements about like where you can call for this or that, or who, if you need benevolence. I just think one area that Freemasonry has fallen down, or is failing in, is somewhere along the line, the Masonic Lodge became divided between the Lodge and the membership, which I'm not sure where that division came from, because every member is part of the Lodge. But then, the Lodge kind of became the idea of like the secretary, treasurer, and then the idea was that the Lodge is responsible for communicating with the membership, but there's no responsibility the other way. And like I said, it's easy and it happens. You'll lose an email address, or somebody doesn't get their trestle board or whatever it is. And there's a responsibility that way for the Lodge to make sure it's communicating regularly to its members. But I feel sometimes we fail to communicate to a member that you have responsibility to keep in touch with the Lodge as well. Like if you move, if you get, even because a brother may say, well, I got sick, it wasn't my fault, I couldn't communicate. It's like, well, then you should have a plan. If I get sick, this is who will contact on my behalf.
Yes.
Like I've always made sure to have that plan. I just think, I try to emphasize there's a membership responsibility towards a Lodge as well.
There's a lot of practical things that are important to teach a brother coming in. There's no question about it. We call them red books here, red book lectures. There's 4 of them. One a pre-EA, and then one that follows each subsequent degree. And it prepares, at first, and then explains later what you've gone through in the actual degree work. But there's a practicality side of the teaching as well, and a conduct. What you described is all in the obligations. as the brothers are hearing you talk, it's like, well, yeah, your ability to answer a summons, health and business permitting. Well, yeah, but there's onus on that brother to answer that summons and to pick up that communication. It's subtle, but it's there. But it needs emphasis. There's no question.
Well, also during the pandemic, unfortunately, we lost a lot of communication with the brothers because over time, we weren't meeting because we were shut down, unfortunately. And when that happens, people find other things to do with their time. So when we finally did come back, it was a little bit of an uphill struggle at times to get people to adjust their calendars back to where they were coming back to the meetings and being involved, because it's so easy to get disinvolved. And that's why the importance we were talking about, what you were talking about in your personal experience, make contact with these people. Do what you can to keep contact with them, let them know what's in the lodge. You don't want just the people that are active in the lodge knowing what's going on in the lodge, because if you don't have that, after a while, you'll lose them altogether. They'll find something else to do with their time.
Yeah, and we certainly saw that the last 3 years. Yeah.
And that's, I think, a struggle that a lot of Masonic jurisdictions are facing. It's not even a matter of active members only, the active members being the exclusively knowing what's happening in lodge. It's becoming even more concentrated than that, I think, because during the pandemic, at least in Ontario, our Grand Lodge put out a dispensation to allow the master, treasurer, secretary to handle basically all the finances while the lodge wasn't meeting, because otherwise, you can't have votes and things like that. The problem is Masons, people are creatures of habit. So you spend a year, the entirety of financial decisions being made by basically 3 people.
Yeah. 2
of whom are basically officers for life. Secretary and treasurer rarely get out of the chair. It becomes commonplace for the remainder of the lodge to start to feel like, well, the finances, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about the administrative stuff. I'll just focus on, I'll show up for ritual, I'll show up for social events, but I'll leave the administrative and business side of it to, the small group of people.
The STPs, we call them, right?
Yeah.
Same 3 people.
And that can be, I've seen that pull. I've even heard Masons suggest, because of that inertia, that change, the STPs, that, business meetings be done away with altogether. You have an installation. I don't agree with it, but the argument is sound in a way based on what I'm seeing. The argument goes, look, we get people for degrees, we get people for social functions, we have very poor attendance at business meetings. So the membership is kind of voting with their feet. You can do an installation where you bring in a new set of officers every year, because you need those to run the degrees, but the actual business just be handled by secretary, treasurer, or master.
So, in my mining career and managing people, one of the things I learned is, if you want to see them participate, you want them actually participating and valued brother in this case, give them a job and hold them accountable. Hey, brother, I need you to be on the scholarship committee. Sickness and distress, hey, can you make some calls to brothers? And this all has to be orchestrated. Worshipful Master is the executive and needs to be holding committees and in person and brothers accountable. And we all know life in the cable tow is pulled on us quite a bit. But I've always felt that if you give a brother something to do, he'll stand up and do it. And so it has to be orchestrated that way, and that's part of the planning process of this and communicating.
Well, we all know that that's key, and we've tried to do that in this lodge, but sometimes there are brothers who, due to their work schedules and stuff, really can't be involved. But you can still give them something small,
Yeah.
Just so long as they know they're still a part of this lodge and they've gone through degrees like you do, and they're kind of off somewhere else. But I stress, we're both the main coaches here in this lodge, and I stress to these guys when they come through that The 3 degrees are kind of like your basic training, I guess, where it gets you to a certain level. And from there, it's a personal journey. But that personal journey should involve not only yourself, but the members of the lodge as well in certain functions. Our lodge picnics, our parades, we do stuff like, get involved. And it's a great thing to do.
To what extent, so to give somebody a job, to give somebody a responsibility, a lodge member, how much of that goes back to the very beginning, the getting to know candidate and an applicant? Because, I'm assuming if the worship master is doing his job well as an executive, and when he's delegating these responsibilities, you're going to try to tailor the responsibility to the brother. So, if you know that a brother is really interested in history, maybe you give him a job dealing with the archives. Or if you know a brother loves to cook or is a baker, maybe you give him a job delivering cookies to widows or shut-ins, or like that idea of getting to know a brother on a level sufficient that you can identify his strengths and then try to tailor that. And how much of that goes back to even the start, getting to know him before he becomes a brother, so you know what his strengths are?
Oh, I think it's critical. Not that, we're going to take up all his weekends reconstructing the lodge roof. If we find out that he's got some contracting abilities, but we actually have had brothers step up and help do that. Fix the automatic chair that comes up the stairs, and a number of things. But we find brothers they want to do a lot of volunteer, and our Shrine Club actually ends up bringing in a lot of interest that way. It's in the public eye, of course, with the parades and so on. It gets recognition. It's a fantastic charity, obviously, and we see brothers wanting to help out there. So I think it's critical to get to know what their interests are at the beginning, and sometimes it's a personal search. They just want to know more. They don't know what they don't know. It's that kind of unconscious incompetence, if you will, but they quickly will know, wow, this is pretty amazing. Look what I've accomplished. I've memorized this work. I understand what I'm going through now. And even to the point where we've mentored people that they want to give back and they want to be a part of the teaching process for the new members coming in. And you start to see people develop to that. So it's an evolution. You're not going to know right away. And I think that's just the nature of the fraternity.
And that can be one of the best parts, right? Seeing somebody come in and find something in the craft that speaks to them, and then they kind of take on that area of responsibility, and not only for themselves, but to bring on other people and mentor other people in that, whether it's a particular piece of ritual, whether it's something administrative, whether it's whatever, community service, connecting the lodge to community, whatever cornerstone, that's a really fun experience to see an entered apprentice discover something for Masonry that touches him, and then bring that forward.
Yeah.
Well, also, if you talk to them before they get in, you kind of get a feel for their interests, and you can kind of somewhat, to a degree, tailor your coaching experience to that person if they're interested in the histories and the mysteries and the philosophy. You can kind of include that with your coaching sessions to a degree. And depending on what their other interests are, we get to know these guys pretty well, and we become good friends with them. And I'm always amazed at the energy and the excitement that comes through with these guys. And you just have to maintain that energy and excitement. Now, we've had our own issues with that, obviously, because as a lodge composed in large part of minors, the active members, our line blows up every 5 years and we have to rebuild this thing because they get transferred somewhere else. they're following opportunities. You know, it's the miner's life. You know, they're here, they're there. We were both miners ourselves, actually.
Yeah.
Roger's an engineer, I was a geologist, and it's a transit type community in that sense.
That's how I came forward. Jim and I were working on some similar mining activity, and although we were different companies, and I said, "Hey, I saw you in the Shriners Parade the other day." And he said, "Yeah, I'm a Shriner and I'm a Mason too." I said, "Really? You're both? Well, how do I become a Mason?" Well, the next thing you know, I'm just whisked away in a room full of Masons that were working at the office, and didn't look back. But it was interesting.
We talked about this again off camera, but moving forward, I know you guys have got a degree coming up. One thing, I talked about this with a lodge in Northern Ontario, and I know we're far from Northern Ontario, but it's kind of a similar situation where I'm from a Masonic jurisdiction. I'm from a Masonic building that has 7 lodges that meet there different nights of the week. And one of the benefits of that is if you're visiting regularly other lodges, you can get them to visit you, and if you have any work you need to be done last minute, you compare that to, say, Northern Ontario or Elko. I think like the closest next lodge to you guys is a few hours away, at least.
Yeah.
So how does that affect whether it be your ability to put on a degree or visitation? Like, if it feels, I've always find that one of the most interesting things about visiting smaller towns like this, it kind of feels like the Masonic Lodge is an island unto itself in a way that I'm not used to, coming from a place where, like I said, every night of the week there's a Masonic Lodge meeting.
And for Grand Master to visit the 50 plus lodges in the state of Nevada, as rural as we are, as large of geography to cover, what we do in our jurisdiction is, or our district, is combining 3 lodges and meet and move that meeting point around at different years to go ahead and host. And so I think last year we hosted, or the year before. And
well, it also allows communication between the brothers from the different lodges, because we're pretty far separated from everybody else.
Yeah, we are. And Jim in particular has done, as he mentioned earlier, has held various positions, including master of other lodges in Eureka and others. And so building that rapport, it is a challenge, because if you need to put on a 3rd degree and you need like 3-4 brothers from another lodge to do it, it's quite a coordinating task, right?
Well, over in Winnemucca, they were doing a 3rd degree last year, and they brought in brothers from at least 3 or 4 different lodges. They had Eureka, I think they had Lovelock, they had different lodges coming in to help them. So if Elko's been fortunate in that we've been able to do our own degrees over the years, but it gets to the point sometimes where you have to ask a brother from a different lodge to come fill a spot, simply because work, availability, whatever, that you have in a small community. So it's kind of neat. Like I say, it's a mixing of the lodges in a way, and you get to know the brothers of the lodges in the area. Few and far between up here, but they get together on occasion. It's a neat thing. I think it's great.
And that's one of those other pieces of practical advice I always give to the wardens, especially the senior warden before he becomes worshipful master, right? And Worship Brother Igor Strukin has done the same thing. Visitation, as much as you can, within circumstances of where your lodge is located, is so important, because when you become master, right, you're going to want to have a good relationship with all the lodges around you to make sure that you can, rely on them for assistance or to organize events together or whatever it might be as well, right? You gotta keep in contact with your lodge, but also visit as many of the lodges as you can.
Yeah, exactly, and we get their trestle boards, and we put ours up, and they'll get ours, and going to Grand Lodge, for example, we'll see members, different lodges there, and it's a great way to solidify some of this and increase the communication. So, yeah, Grand Lodge is a good way to do that.
And getting to know other people, I think is a great thing. You came through. We've had other people come through. We had a guy from Nigeria that showed up one night. We had guys from the lodge in Arizona who's actually had moved here and wants to affiliate for the last state of communication we had. But you get guys coming through, and it's really a neat thing because it kind of gives that little spark to the lodge that, yeah, we're not alone out here. There's other guys out there.
Right. And we occasionally hear back from some of the brothers that have left. And there's a picture right over my shoulder here of one of the guys, Brother Darren Dell, that I mentored years ago, and well, Jim, at some point you probably did too, and so we were pleased to hear that he worked himself up to worshipful master in a lodge outside of Toronto, Ontario, and sent back a really nice picture taken with the Grand Master and the entourage there. So it's great to hear back and see how brothers are doing.
Well, another thing too, the picture up on the other wall, which you can't see, is a lodge in New Zealand. And when I was master of this lodge the first time, back in '99, there was a brother working on a project out there automating our lab at the mine. And so we got to know, once I realized he was a Mason, he realized I was a Mason. We had some good conversations and stuff and all that, and a little bit of interaction there. And so when he went back to New Zealand, he sent us that great picture from his lodge in New Zealand. Those guys, they really dress up over there, and it looks really good. So we sent him a picture back because we had a little bit of communication there for a while. And it was great, to have that. Someone from another part of the world come in, you find out you're a Mason, you get to talking, and for a while at least, it brings two lodges on different sides of the world together. I thought it was great. I'm very proud of that up there, that picture in that lodge in New Zealand there. That was great.
I agree. I think it's wonderful. I try to do that with Hull-Whistle Lodge, which is a lodge in England where my grandfather was a member, master. Again, I think every interview kind of a couple key points come out. I think, in this interview, the kind of the key point has been the necessity of communication, whether it's communication between membership of a lodge, communication between different lodges, even communication between lodges on other sides of the world. I think maintaining communication with your brothers, however you can, is one of the ways that the craft can grow and become strong despite some of the whatever challenges there may be.
Yeah, it's so important. And it never hurts out in public. It might be cliche, but wear the hat. Wear square and compasses on your shirt, pin. A lot of us have Masonic plates, license plates, and so on. And I've got an interesting story to tell you if you want to hear it. So we went on this cruise, a very short 4-day cruise with the family, and out of LA and went to Ensenada, Mexico, and stopped at Catalina Island in between. And while on the cruise, my son was just young at that time, and we were all leaving the ship to get on the smaller boats to Catalina Island. My son pulled in my pant leg and he said, "Hey Dad, there's a guy wearing a hat that similar to what you wear." I said, "You mean Masonic hat?" He goes, "Yeah." And I was so impressed that my son recognized that. And of course, there's 1,000 of us leaving the ship at the time. And I said, "Where'd he go?" And we lost him in the crowd. And as fate would have it, with all the boats that were going ashore that day, I get seated right beside this guy, and my wife on the other side, my kids. And I said, "There's the guy." And my son said, "Yeah, that's him." And so we went through the derogatories, the Q&A to make sure that we just weren't wearing someone else's hats. And Of course, my wife, she rolled her eyes up in her head and said, "Oh, here we go." And you've all been there, you guys. And this fella, older fella, he said, "Hey, there's about 32 of us on the ship of 1,000 people, and we're actually meeting tonight. So if you want to come for some scotch and cigar, whatever, and we're going to have a little meeting, get to know everybody." And it was amazing. And we had other prior commitments on the island. I couldn't go, but it just, wherever you go, instant friendship. And yeah, that was one of the first experiences I had outside of a lodge, getting to know others.
I think that is a wonderful story and a great place to end the interview, because it's just a perfect example of one of the best parts of Masonry, which is wherever you go, you can be from Ontario and end up in Elko, you can be in New Zealand and end up in Elko, you can be in a cruise ship, right? You're going to eventually meet a brother and make a new friend and make that connection, which is one of the best things about the fraternity. I got to connect with you guys, and I'm very happy about that. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
We're honored. We're honored to have you. Thank you.
And now I come over here and I'll hit the stop button. Oh God, so fun.